We should actually do this.
We should begin. Hello, everybody, and welcome.
Wait, we haven't.
Welcome to the Chip Lunch Podcast. It's begun. It is begun. We haven't briefed you at all, though. We should probably brief. All right.
Well, you were doing the intro, so...
No, we've done the intro. The intro's done.
Oh, the intro's done.
That was the intro. And now we're going to cut.
You were doing a British voice.
That was the intro, and then we're going to cut, and now we've begun.
Okay, we've begun, haven't we?
We've begun.
All right,
it's started.
Thanks for the intro, Ethan.
That's really good. I have done a really good job. I can't remember doing it.
Keep telling yourself that.
I do every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Someone needs to tell me.
Yeah. We should say that it is raining. We are like sun-kissed and beautiful because it's been the holidays and we had a week off, and I went to the beach a few times. You went camping.
I went camping
in a sunny
next
location.
to a beach.
However, right now is a torrential downpour, which is what provides the static kind of sound on the microphone, if anyone's wondering what that is. Would you like to introduce our guest? Because you're boring.
Yeah, that's fair.
Are you joking?
I'll take the insult and I'll move on as the bigger man. It's really cool to have Lauren on Chip Lunch. Hello.
Hi, Lauren.
Welcome
Hello.
to the third space studio.
Correct. By the way, I don't think you're boring.
Thank you.
Okay,
I appreciate you going back on what you said before.
I apologise. I repent of my...
I accept the apology. I appreciate the apology, and I love you.
I love you too.
I want you to know that. This is a really beautiful podcast where we're really good friends.
Yeah.
I really do love Ethan.
Yeah, I wasn't offended at all because I know that you love me and I love you and we're good.
Hey, to
Lauren,
that
welcome.
point, hang on, wait. Just before we make that point, remember in the staff meeting how we were like looking at all the Myers-Briggs,
Oh yes, we
yeah.
did a Myers-Briggs thing.
and we didn't do the test, but we like looked at all the different personality types, and mine came out so accurate because it was like uses humour and verbal jousting to like talk
That
about
is so
something.
you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It
what
was
I
so
did.
accurate. It was so good.
Anyway, so let's let Lauren actually speak.
What's your do you have a Myers-Briggs personality?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I would have done it at uni when I did psych, but I can't
You don't remember
remember.
you don't
what
remember
it
the
is.
letters?
It's probably something to do with being an extrovert.
Yeah, fair.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's something we talk about a lot on the podcast.
We do.
is
We do talk a lot about
extrovert
extroversion.
Yeah.
and versus introvert.
Yeah.
What do you think makes you extroverted?
I think I'm always very willing to chat. I could talk underwater
Awesome.
easily.
That's just a fun. Sorry, I was laughing at the saying, not that you.
No. Well, there's a further saying, which I don't know if it's very well known, or maybe it's an Irish saying because my family's Irish. You could talk underwater with a mouthful of marbles, and that was frequently used to refer to me when I was a child.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think I probably have a very loud voice, loud laugh, but I'm just like, yeah.
I don't think you have
Up for
a
a
loud
chat.
voice.
No?
I think you have a good.
I used to get
volume
told on
voice.
prac, you need to vary the level of your volume, and I
Oh,
was
wow.
like, what's wrong?
What's wrong with that?
This is how I talk.
It's just my volume.
Is this offensively loud?
It's just my bass.
Didn't know I was talking through a megaphone.
I thought this was normal. Yeah.
Amazing. Did you then
Yeah, and to the point where I use it quite a lot now. That's a good classroom management technique.
Yeah, right.
Because you can be talking, and then as soon as you talk quietly,
Draw me.
Ooh.
they're like, you need to listen.
Amazing.
Or it's like, I will keep talking, and once you can hear me, you can follow the instructions.
Yeah, quality.
Oh,
Yeah.
Such a teacher vibe.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
We're extroverts, I think we decided.
Yeah.
Yes, I had a very similar thing growing up, but instead of being told I could talk underwater, it was I could talk through a bag of wet cement.
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
That was the thing that was said in our. That was the thing that was said in our.
I hate
family.
those
So
sayings.
in that,
Really?
where is your face? Is your face
Oh, good.
head
Oh
down
no!
in the
Like
cement? Or is it
I'm like
If I
they've
push-
poured the wet cement in the concrete, and I'm just lying in there, and I'm just like
Yeah.
yeah, just
That's not in
still
bag.
chatting.
If
I
I
don't know.
poured
I
it.
don't know. I might have said the saying wrong. I don't. It's something about wet cement.
Okay. I'm not criticizing you, Ethan.
No.
I think these sayings
probably
are
it probably was a poor replication of the saying.
through a bag of wet cement.
Under wet cement. I don't know.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
All
It was
that.
that instead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of speaking, the first question we have is on Chip Lunch is Lauren, how do you like your chips?
Okay, so
I love it when everyone. Sorry to interrupt you.
Go for it.
Everyone goes, okay. So
it's very serious business.
It is.
I
It's
feel
really
like
important.
if anyone's like, oh, like however they come, no, you don't deserve chips.
That was Louisa. She was like, yeah, I'll just have them however.
No.
it's like, it's more about having chips like with people.
Oh, no,
I
it's
don't
not.
want it.
That's rubbish. You can have chips without people. It has to be your way.
That's
we love
hilarious.
You, we love you, Louisa.
So we do love you, Lou. So I will 9 times out of 10 go chicken salt, depending if sometimes if I'm eating a ham and hot chip sandwich, it needs to be plain salt because it just gets a bit too.
Hang on,
overwhelming.
ham and hot chips.
Yeah, it was like a staple
That's
picnic
awesome.
food when I was little. Actually, I had it for dinner the other
On
night.
the same sandwich?
Yeah. So best on white bread, and you put a
Yeah.
thin layer of like butter, and then quite a bit of ham, and then you just stack it with hot chips, and then it's actually much better if you kind of squish the bread into the chips.
I can see
It's
it.
so
Merry
good.
I can see it
Christmas.
working.
It's so good. So that's
love
where
it.
I eat plain
Hot chip
chips.
sandwiches are so good.
Yeah. But generally chicken salt. I also really got into this garlic dip at Aldi, which I'm trying to slowly convert everyone to. I think Kath Breen mentioned it as well.
I feel like someone has mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, yes.
It's essentially, it's almost like just pulverized garlic, and it's just like aioli on steroids. It's so good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So
That is,
that's how I would have it.
they are fantastic options and ways
Yeah.
of
Is
using
the,
chips.
the garlic's cooked, right?
No, I don't know.
Well, the
I
only
don't
reason
know.
I'm saying that, sorry, is because I once made a hummus
Yeah.
and I put too much garlic in it, and it was so spicy.
Oh, yeah.
It was incredibly spicy.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, I wonder if they cook it, or
Yeah,
maybe
I
they
don't
just
know.
don't put too much in like I did.
Oh, it's basically just like mashed up garlic.
Like minced garlic or
Minced garlic, that's it. It's
Yeah,
like
amazing.
that. I don't
And
know if
just-
there's any other ingredients on it.
Surely
It might
there
just be garlic.
If it's an aioli or something, don't you have to have egg?
No, there's no. It's not aioli. It's like literally just pulverized garlic. It's so good.
Wow.
That's
Love it.
Massive.
wild.
Yeah.
Kind of like a nut butter almost, because that like
Yes.
peanut butter.
Yeah,
is
like
just-
garlic butter.
Yeah,
Almost.
mate.
Yeah.
Amazing. Speaking of garlic butter, this segue worked really well. How did you become a Christian?
That sounds like you know something.
I don't know. This, if your story has
Do I
anything
need
to
to
do
weave
with
garlic butter into this?
I would love you to.
if
That
you
would be-
could, that
yeah.
would be incredible.
Okay, let's
She is an English teacher.
yeah.
So
I don't know if I
let's.
can make a metaphor that quickly. So how did I become a Christian? I became a Christian when I was about 5, and I was sitting in Sunday school at the church that I grew up in, which was Sutherland Presbyterian. And my scripture teacher was a lovely, godly woman called Mrs. Evans. And she was talking about how, like, Jesus forgives us for things that we do wrong and when we hurt people and when we hurt God by, like, you know, talking about, like, you know, well, when you hurt your brother or sister or when you, that kind of thing. And as a child, I was feral. I was so feral, like really bad. And I was sitting there and I'm like, well, I have to say sorry to my mum and I have to ask her for forgiveness. And Mrs. Evans talked about how Jesus forgives those who forgive us. And I was like, so I think I need to say sorry to Jesus and like have that kind of relationship. And so it just kind of made sense. And then, like, as a very small child, that was how I became a Christian. And then slowly over the years, you know, it's been stretched and pulled and made more complex. And yeah, so that's the day I remember becoming Christian.
Very cool.
It's rather prescient to have that thinking of like, I need to say sorry to my mum, but also
Yeah.
say sorry to Jesus.
Yeah.
Do you think anything? I mean, it's so you were quite young. I mean,
Yeah.
you're very young becoming Christian
Yeah.
at 5 compared to like a lot
Compared
of
to
people,
lots of people.
and a lot of people we've
Yeah.
had on the podcast asking
Yeah.
the same question. So I'm just wondering, like, did you go home and say sorry to your mum?
Yeah, I think I was like, my mum would always be like, so what did you learn in Sunday school today? And I was like, I learned that Jesus forgives us, and that Jesus forgives the people who forgive us, and that I need to do that. And I think like my mum was always, and continues to be really good at having like kind of wisdom, godly conversations. And I think she probably teased that out over time. Like, what did you mean by that? And yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And your mum was a Christian?
Yeah, my mum's a Christian.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
So,
very cool.
I mean, it's different becoming a Christian that young and also being part of a Christian family.
Yeah.
Was there a moment later on where, I mean, a lot of the people we talk about, who talked with, who've grown up in a Christian family, said that they had to take the faith on. They came to a point where they realised they had to take a faith on themselves rather than just going, this is my family's faith. Was there a moment for that for you? Or do you think that because you did that so young, that didn't happen so much?
Yeah, I think probably because it happened so young, I just kind of then almost like organically grew in my church. And because the church that I went to, like demographically was very old. So there was, my mum was the youngest person. She was the only young person, apart from maybe one other parent. And my grandparents also went to that church. And I would say the average age of people was from 70 to 90. So you just have, like, I've found in my faith having lots of those kind of organic but wisdom-filled conversations with older Christians has helped to just, it's almost like when you're making, well, not me, but like when a sculptor is making a sculpture and they get like that block of marble and then they can see what's going to be in that block of marble and they slowly chip away at it. I feel like having those wisdom-filled conversations with people has been probably more shaping over time slowly than I need to take this on for myself now. I think I've just kind of grabbed little pieces.
Yeah, I think that's a really, like, I became a Christian later, but I think that is a good description of the way that God kept shaping me rather than like a one moment. Yeah. Where, like some people do have that, but rather than one moment. If you were going to describe yourself as a marble statue, which one would it be though?
Oh,
that's really important.
I really like the one in Pride and Prejudice, the 2006 one. Sorry, people who like the
Can you find
earlier
that?
one.
Oh, sorry, Ek, can you please find that picture and put it up?
There's this sculpture that is in Mr. Darcy's house, which is Pemberley House, and he's purportedly been sculpting it, and it's this woman.
Why did you say purportedly? Does that mean you don't think he has? He's got a few other.
It's just very a dichotomous part of his character because he's quite mean and that's it. But then there's this gorgeous, beautiful sculpture, and in the movie they have this woman. It's like it's like up to her. She's kind of kneeling, and over her face there's like this veil. And it's astonishing to look at because you're like, how do you sculpt a veil into
it's amazing, actually. That's
marble? And like there's so much intricacy and like kind of beauty in it. But it's actually really hard and tough, and it's been centered on this core of rock. So I like that one because it's so beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
It's almost, it almost looks impossible.
It does.
It's like the guy who sculpts pillows out of marble. They are incredible. They look like a fluffy pillow.
Well, that's what I find so fascinating about statues and stuff is that how do they make them? Like you think even like the statue of David or whatever. It's like yes, you chipped it away, but then how did you make everything so smooth and then not?
Look,
What?
those pillows.
The
They are made of
pillows
marble.
are amazing.
Yeah.
Now,
Ek, put photos of pillows in there too. We're starting a marble cast
A marble cast.
where we talk about famous sculptures.
I love the grain in that one.
I love the grain in that one.
What is it? The
you can tell it's Norwegian.
Like the swirl.
Yeah, so it's Norwegian.
Because it says it. I'm like, wow, you know so much about
I'm all over it. Yeah, it's start a marble cast. Of course, I know things about marble.
It's a very Scandinavian thing to do, though, isn't it?
You reckon
I feel like
to cast to whatever this is, sculpt pillows?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of see that actually.
I believe you.
There's something Scandi about it.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Is that what they slept on before pillows?
No, I would be a pillow.
What did people sleep on before pillows?
Feathers.
Yeah.
What,
Or
just
just
a
wooden
chicken?
boards or
A whole chicken.
Yeah.
yeah.
Wooden boards
Yeah.
stacked up.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
and just it's horrible.
But surely they put something softer on there.
Sometimes they'd get furs or stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and they'd have a pallet,
Yeah.
that they'd sleep on, and
What, just from the local freight company?
yeah, from the local freight, kind of a free off someone who needed it. Yeah,
Jerusalem TNT services.
Jerusalem. I feel like you need to Jerusalem.
oh,
I think you need to like not TNT. I like it, but I think you
Yeah.
need to be like Jerusalem job works or something.
Job works with an X and an ER.
Oh,
yeah.
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 Just to bring it into the
Speaking of bringing it
you could do-
back to the
Yeah.
podcast,
Egyptian pyramids with a Z. That's their
Yeah.
that's their thing. Their logo is
the
this
two
big
Zs
pyramid.
would be like two pyramids
Yes.
facing each other.
Yes.
in Jerusalem. Or
No,
in-
well,
no,
there's,
in
there's,
Egypt.
it's a
Okay.
global company. There's the Egypt, and they
they're
ship
a
to
global
There's a difference.
and
conglomerate.
the Egyptians
Like-
ship to Israel, and they ship up to the Greek people and the Romans, and they all get there from there because they've got a lot of leftover pallets from the big stones that they were building pyramids out of. It's
This
a
makes
legit
me think of,
enterprise.
have you ever read Asterix?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they have the obelisk. Obelisk.
And they have the obelisk trade. So silly.
I love
Oh.
Asterix. That's the best.
It's
that is
actually
the
phenomenal.
Best book. It's so
Absolutely
funny. There's so many
phenomenal.
hidden jokes in there
Yeah.
that you don't understand until you read it as an adult.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh,
And then the
Truly
names.
hilarious.
You know, they do the names.
So good.
Vital statistics.
Yeah.
That's the name of the chief. The chief's name is Vital Statistics. There's Asterix. There's Obelix. There's Getafix.
Yep.
There's the Druid.
Yep.
Put all these pictures up.
Yeah. They're little cartoon, little 5 little pictures of them. It's
It's
glorious.
amazing. It's so well done.
Yeah, it's amazing. Anyway,
Wow.
we got talking about marble, which actually I love that
Analogy.
That analogy. It's
Oh, cool.
awesome. As a really beautiful, depiction of God working on us, as He's got something in mind.
Yeah.
And one day when we get to heaven, we'll be in our physically we'll be perfect bodies and all that and new creation and that stuff. But here it's really beautiful as we become more like Jesus day in and day out. We are molded and our hearts are shaped, and God knows where that's going.
it also, I think, is probably a helpful reminder that it's not instant
Mm.
and is never going to be like one day I was like this and then I was like this and then I never changed again.
Mm.
Because that's not how life works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think things like the trials and the things that happen in our life are those things that kind of shape that
Yeah.
maybe a little bit more, I don't know, aggressively than, you know, slowly, like reading your Bible and stuff. Not that doesn't shape you, but those bigger trials where you're kind of forced into like turning to God and learning something very quickly or retrospectively realizing, I think those shape us.
But also, like you were describing, sometimes it's just conversations and relationship
Absolutely.
with, in your case, older Christians and people being able to speak into your life. Like that stuff all shapes you too. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that's
really
life
cool.
too. Like
Yeah.
of anything. And obviously as Christians we believe that God is behind everything. But even with like, you know, big pieces of work or I don't know, whatever, it has to be long term. And it's weird that we've tricked into thinking that, like, even, you know, they talk about a millionaire overnight or whatever, and it's like, I was a millionaire 10 years in the making. Like I was an overnight success in 10 years or something like that.
I was working on this for so many years and then suddenly lockdown happened and my Zoom app went crazy.
Yeah.
Like it's not an overnight thing. Like that person's been working on it for...
And I don't think anything really is.
No.
Unless God chooses it to be, I suppose. But I think that, and I think it speaks something about like God's character also about He's actually made things to develop slowly in a lot of respects rather than, again, like I said, it's like, oh, he went viral. Like, but sometimes if someone goes viral, like it ends their career.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Let's go back to your childhood.
Yeah.
Lauren. You said that you became Christian at 5, which is really cool. Do you know of anything around that time that changed? You said you were rather feral. Do you think that changed from that time, or is it that obviously a process, like we said?
I think I was probably still feral. I had raging ADHD. I think I probably was quicker to realise that I'd hurt someone or I'd done something, and more so like inclined to apologize or to fix or remedy the situation rather than disappear and just kind of let the chips fall where they may. So
can you tell us more, like you said, raging ADHD? As someone that I don't understand that. What does that mean?
So I'm an only child, and so for some examples, when I talked very young. No surprise why I'm still talking now. So I talked very young, and my mum and my grandma would always tell this story that when I was little, because I talked very young, I would stand in my cot and I'd be like, let me out. And they're like, no. And I'm like, you're going to let me out or I'll vomit in this cot and you'll have to take me out. And so
that's amazing.
Then I would, and then my mum would have to take me out.
You would vomit?
Yeah. Wow. I don't know why.
How did you make yourself vomit when you were...
Is the tack vom?
I have no idea.
Wow.
I ripped like all the wallpaper off my room when I was about 2, and I broke my cot. It was like, I would just have tantrums, and it was probably a lot of emotional dysregulation that got better over time, and then I got medication and stuff, but it was probably a lot of that in terms of what I mean by raging ADHD. It was probably raging emotional dysregulation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dysregulation, does that mean not able to regulate your emotions in the right way? Got it. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Just breaking down the lingo. That's all. So it changed the fact that you noticed that, like, if you hurt someone, you think that was happening more. Yeah. When do you think was the next time that you realised, actually, this is different to what I used to be?
I think there's probably many, but the one that probably stands out the most in my life is, so when I was in year 9 and 10, I got really badly bullied at school, like horrifically badly bullied. I was starting to get really sick at that same time. So I had a really bad thyroid, and I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder called Hashimoto's thyroiditis.
Oh, yes. Heard of that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was also starting to get migraines, and then I started getting what they found out was this like really rare condition, because if it's rare, I've got it, which was called transient epileptic amnesia. And basically, because of the stress and the anxiety of being sick and being bullied, my kind of short-term memory was just like hitting pause instead of recording. Oh,
really?
And so I would just frequently go, how did I get here? And I'd be distressed and not know. Like, there was one time I was at Miranda, and all of a sudden it was like everything clicked in again, and I was like,
oh,
terrified, because I had no memory of getting there. I had no memory of why I was there. And like in that time, like there was so much stuff going on for me. I didn't want to be at school. I was very anxious. And before they found out that I had this memory thing, they were looking for a brain tumor, and I was 15. Wow. That's like, I just remember sitting in my class. I was a good student. I was an extension student, but I just tapped out. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I would just go to school every day and just sit and silently pray in my head for hours. And it was like that moment where I just went, and it was, Paul actually reminded me of it the other night when he preached on New Year's Eve. It's not that what if, it's even if. And I kind of figured, well, what if I have this tumor that they're looking for? What if I have, and I'm like, well, even if, God will still look after me. It will still be God's plan, which is a huge thing for like a 15-year-old to figure out, like essentially grapple with your existentialism.
No, it's huge.
But the only way I think I ever would have got through it was because I was so given over to God taking control. Like, I knew I couldn't control it. I knew my doctors couldn't control it. They were at a loss as to what was going on for me. And I thought, well, the only person who knows is the person who created me. Yeah. And so that's probably one of the biggest turning points in my Christian faith, like learning, like in a really hard way, to give everything over to God and just go, oh, I can't do it, but you created me, so you know.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
So the short-term, I've forgotten the term already.
Transient epileptic amnesia.
Sure. that short term,
Yeah. It went away.
It went away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Over time.
I
I knew where you were going.
Yeah, that was what I was trying to
It
get to.
did go away. So I was like, I got to get out of this school.
Yep.
And all my friends went to the Christian school, and I knew that there was like no spots, and I just said to my mum, like, we just need to pray about it. Like if it's going to happen, God will make it happen. And so we prayed, and then I got into the school, and I now work there. But like at the time, you just sit in the messiness, and I think that's so much of what life is. You just got to sit in the messiness.
Oh yeah.
And then it wasn't until years later that I realised, oh, well, God did that in my life so that I would learn to trust him. And then that led me to this, and then that led me to this and this and this and this. And you don't see it at that time, but you see it afterwards. And I think that's the biggest and probably the most difficult way to learn lessons. But like if you look at the Bible, God does that to all of his people. Like he's not like, here's a scroll with a lesson I'd like you to learn. He's like, no, Israelites, you're going to walk around the desert because you're not learning your lesson. And I think that's a really helpful
Well, it's very much like the two things that you've talked about already is being sculpted by God, but it's also a long-term thing. Like a sculpture takes a long time to do when you whether you're doing a pillow or a statue. But also, like we talked about, like things being a long-term process of things happening. And I think when you said sit in the messiness, I think that's one of the big things that God has taught me a lot is that just to sit in it and go, everything does suck. Yeah. However, even if, like you said, there's going to be something at the end of it, whatever it is.
Yeah. And you might not find that out as soon as whatever it is ends. Yeah. It could be years later.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I found it really encouraging when I talk to people who have been Christians for a lot longer than me. That's like their main take home is like, you just got to wait. And if you look at people in the Bible, like some people waited a long time. Like Sarah and Abraham waited a long time and then God came through. Yeah.
That's really cool.
That was year 10.
Yeah, that was year 10.
So did you finish school?
Yeah.
You must have, right?
Yeah, so I went to the Christian school and I finished.
Oh, so you changed
Yeah, I
the
changed
school.
And I finished high school. And then even at the end of high school, so I was set on, I was going to do a Bachelor of Psychology, then I was going to do an honours, and then I was going to be either a forensic psychologist or an educational psychologist. And I was like, God, that is what we are doing. And that was the key thing.
That always works
me telling God, that's what we're doing.
Let's
God's
go.
like, no.
That sounds a lot like you're in the cot and about to vomit.
Yeah.
And God's like,
Let
no, I'm
me
going
out,
to teach
I
you a
will vomit.
lesson. So I studied so much for Year 12 HSE, and I got to the end of it and I didn't get the result that I needed.
Which would have been tough given the expectations you put on yourself.
I cried for 4 days.
Oh, wow.
And I have this letter that I wrote at the time to God, and I still have it because it's just like I have a look at it like every couple of years when I'm like cleaning stuff out, and I'm like, oh yeah, remember that time? And I was like, God, how dare you take this from me? And I was going to help people, and like, what are you doing? And then I ended up in this different degree, which was great. It suited me much more than psych. And then I ended up in a career path as a teacher that I probably never would have figured out on my own. And I love it. And I can see so much of like God's like nudging me slowly. No, we're going this way. We're going this way.
The bumpers are out.
Yeah. The bumpers are up, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of only after that where you go, see what you did there. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I finished school, but went through another tough lesson at the end of school. And then,
Were you praying as much during that time as you were, like you were talking about it a little bit earlier in high school?
Probably not. I feel like...
That's not a criticism.
No.
I'm interested in that.
No, I feel like when I was praying when I was in year 10 at school, it was like, I need God for the next breath. Which we do. We always do. But it was like I don't think I can get through the next breath without God. And I think Yeah, like I was still praying, but it wasn't the same desperate, life-altering prayer.
Because you'd got through that bit, and now you're like, well, then now I know what we're doing.
Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to rely on... And you go through these seasons, and I still do it now, where I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to rely on you this much, and then I got it. And you can't do that.
No.
And it's like, you know, when you play Crash Bandicoot.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell me about
Yes.
it. I love Crash Bandicoot.
Such a good game.
You know
Which
how-
one? Which one? Hang on.
Well, 1 and 3 are my favourites.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I feel like constantly, like, the way that God, like, teaches me is, you know, when you get to the end of, like, a bonus level and then you, like, something happens and it's, like, back to the checkpoint and you're like,
Yep.
I just did all of this.
Yep.
I feel
Yep.
like that's
Yep.
what the way God shapes me is like. I constantly have to get respawned back to a checkpoint. And then eventually
Amazing.
I learn that lesson and I can move on to the next level.
Yeah.
But it's like, I feel like that's the way it is.
Yeah.
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 So I think, yeah, it's never going to be instant, which I actually find, I think probably more so now than when I was younger. Like, I notice this in myself, but also in other people. Maybe it's because of our society and the way that technology works now. I feel like we're more searching for the instant answer.
Oh, yeah.
And when you don't get it, it's so frustrating.
Well, that's the like
But-
we were talking about before.
Yeah.
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 I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's technology, or do you reckon we've just always been like that?
And it's probably enhanced it.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
It has
Yeah.
fanned the flames.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to impress you
Yeah.
with my vocabulary.
You don't need to do
I said prescient before and you didn't say anything.
What?
Sorry.
Just prescient.
I don't know what that means.
Go on, Lauren. You know the definition,
did
don't
you
you?
say it
I said
was?
prescient.
Prescient.
I don't think I even know what that is.
Look it up.
He wins.
It's
I
always
probably
a-
know it in context.
No, it's
but-
okay. Sorry if I exposed you there.
No, no.
The one
I
thing
love
though,
learning new
So
words.
keen for it to not be a real word.
it's a real word. Thank you very much.
You are a stimulating person. You brighten. Oh no, what?
No, what? That's
That
wrong.
sounds like
Did I
a
spelt it
daily
wrong?
affirmation.
Yeah. You brighten
Stimulate you
social
brighten
gatherings with your
people.
fresh and original ideas.
What is this?
You are a
What are you
prescient.
reading?
Sounds like
I
a
don't
star
know.
sign.
Oh, prescient.
I think you've spelled
No,
it
that's not a real. That's
This
a,
is
that's a
always,
company.
there's always a good chance to put Google Translate.
Prussian? Nope.
I think you spelt it wrong. Here we go.
The prescient coat of arms.
Having prescience or knowledge of events before they exist or happen. Having
Oh,
foresight.
Oh, yeah.
like SC. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I did double S.
Oh.
I didn't do
Classic mistake.
classic
Yeah.
mistake.
So fine.
Or prescient.
Oh, I don't like that
Prescient.
pronunciation.
Prescient.
Or prescient.
Mm.
Or prescient.
Well, there's 3 ways of pronouncing it.
Because the SC makes a sh noise,
Oosh.
except in science and except in all the times it does that. Never mind, ignore me. Shh, indeed.
I think you're very good at analogies, by the way. You've done like 3 or 4 now.
Oh.
I'm terrible at them. And I'm
I'm
like,
an English teacher, so I have to kind of compare things and make things easier.
But also, Joel doesn't like sayings like talking underwater with a mouthful of marbles. Like when you're like always talking like that, it is helpful to then get the other stuff off the top of your head.
Yeah.
It's a. You were just commenting about how you don't like analogies and metaphors, and then you said,
Oh, see.
Oh,
I've
wow,
changed
you're
your
so good at it.
opinion.
no, I didn't say analogies were bad. I don't like it when it's like
specifically that one.
that
Fair enough.
guy could eat an apple through a tennis racket, like all that kind of stuff. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
find them weird.
Like an idiom, like raining cats and dogs.
Idioms.
That's an idiom.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Because what was the other one you said? Yeah, like it's almost derogatory to the person, but it's
Yes.
not, and I don't think it's funny either.
Yes.
The like the first time when it's like eating an apple through a tennis racket, I'm like, that's funny because it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like who's doing that? Like,
But it's being mean. It's being mean about their teeth. That's why.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's why I don't like it.
Yeah.
But
Is that what that is?
yeah.
That's
See,
awful.
See,
Yeah,
it's awful
it's
thing
not
to say
a
to
nice
someone.
one.
Someone
No.
said
That's an
it to
awful
me
thing
like
to say to
a
someone.
year ago. So not me, about
Oh,
me, but
I was
about
like, you have
someone
really
else. And I'm like,
straight
what? What did you say? Who's it? And then I like imagine someone trying
that's
to
an
eat an
awful
apple
thing
through a
to say.
tennis racket.
Yeah, that's what
But-
it means.
just like, I don't know, like, hit the frog and toad. Like, all that kind of
that
stuff.
mean?
Like,
That's not an idiom. That's
Is that Cockney rhyming slang?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
Cockney
Yeah.
rhyming slang.
even those are like, because
They're
they're
weird.
Australian thing. They're weird too. Yeah.
Yeah. But that,
I think that's actually substituting a swear word. So
okay.
Is it?
I think.
They used that. This is a very nerdy thing to say.
Far away.
They used Cockney
Far away.
rhyming slang to get around the police.
Yes.
So it was like
Yes.
a code, but then it's evolved even again since then.
I like that knowledge. That's not nerdy. That's cool
That is cool.
Okay.
for me. Anyway.
No. I like
Because
that.
then
That's great.
you think about like the random things. Oh, do tiling in your bathroom or something. And it's like, it's like, I'll get you out there. I'll do the grout, and like, it means something else. Is what I'm saying. So it means something
Yes.
completely different. It's
Right.
like, I'm gonna have a
Okay.
fight with you.
Yeah, okay. But
Yeah.
fight with you.
If
It's
you do
tiling.
that, mate, I'm gonna do tiling in your bathroom, and you do the grout or something like that. Are you laughing at what I'm saying or the accent? Which one?
I don't know. I don't remember where we were.
Are you all right
I don't
there?
remember.
Jeez.
I'm lost.
We were talking about how Lauren
It's excellent.
was planning to become a psychologist.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
Why
became a
was
teacher.
that? Because you had a lot of help with your anxiety and things like that.
Probably.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And you wanted to help people. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
So, yeah, I wanted to do that. And then I'm so not suited to it. Like, if I was a psychologist, I would be like, not a helpful person, I don't think.
Why?
I just feel like sometimes I would probably go, I think you need to get some perspective.
Listen, sort yourself out.
That's so funny.
And I think it would be, yeah.
That's awesome.
Not for people who have like serious things going
of
on.
course,
Like I
of
work
course, of
with,
course.
let's just say, I work with a lot of teenage girls.
Yes.
And problems are made from molehills into mountains. And
Yes.
sometimes I'm like, I think you just need to get some perspective on this. Like
Yeah.
this is, yeah.
And sometimes
So-
that's necessary.
So sometimes it is very necessary. So I really want to be a psychologist. Actually, before that, I wanted to be an industrial barrister, and then I wanted to be a forensic pathologist.
Hang on, what's an industrial barrister? Sounds like you run in the court in a warehouse or something. What does that mean?
No, they like deal with huge kind of compensation claims. I don't really know. I feel like I invested in the title more than the job.
I like industrial barrister.
That sounded good.
Yeah, it would look good on my door, like on those desk nameplate
Yes.
things. Yeah,
Yes.
Lauren Dalrymple.
Yeah, industrial
Industrial
barrister.
barrister.
Would
Same
you
with the other one, the forensic.
I went to be a forensic pathologist.
See, that's a great title.
So in Australia, they're called coroners quite often.
Okay.
Like,
I
so
feel
it's
like
like
you've
the
watched too
people
much
who.
CSI or something.
Yeah, Silent Witness, big show for me.
Silent
Yeah.
Witness. I've heard that's a lot better than something like CSI. Though.
Yeah. So I got into that, and then I was like, oh, there's like 4 people in Australia who do this job. I'm never going to get a job.
wow. Okay, yeah, right.
Also, I'd had to do I would have had to do a medical
But
degree.
all those jobs, you'd set yourself like a really high expectation.
it's really high
of
bar.
a UAI that you needed
Oh,
to get.
yeah.
Okay.
And that did not happen.
How high was it?
To get into like the law thing, it was like 96 or
Law's
something.
high. Yeah.
And then the forensic
The other one was medicine. It was
Yeah,
just
well,
like,
no,
which
but
is,
you do the forensic anthropology first, and
Right.
then you do medicine afterwards as a
which
postgrad.
which is lower.
So you
Yeah.
can be dumber.
Yeah.
What's the thing? It's like it's not how smart you are.
No, it's not.
No.
It's
And like I got into uni, and my degree changed form and ownership throughout the uni like
would
3
you
times.
say it was sculpted?
It was sculpted, Joel. Yeah.
I think I know what your title's going to be of this episode.
Yeah. Yeah, so it changed, and like I'm a big advocate, having gone through that very tough lesson of this is what it will be, this is what I'm going to do, this is the course I need to do. Like, just no.
I think you need some perspective.
I needed some perspective. Yeah, so it's just like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
I think people should like who at 19 knows exactly what they want to do, and
Yeah.
that's going to be their career trajectory forever.
Yeah.
Like I certainly didn't.
And even when they do think they know and they do it, a lot of people change that
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. I mean, I got to the very last week of my arts degree, and then I was like, oh, I really like tutoring. Maybe I should be a teacher. And then I literally like submitted my application to the MTeach
Just
like
like that.
4 minutes before it was due.
Yeah, wow.
Really?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. That's very cool.
And do you think you have the same things being a teacher
Mm.
that you wanted to do in all those other roles?
Oh yeah, I think I probably help people more now.
Nice.
So in my job, I use my psych degree a lot because I'm a learning support teacher.
Okay.
So I deal with lots of kids who are sick or who have disabilities or who have things like anxiety and depression and things like that. And so having experienced a lot of that, I know what that feels like. I know how lost and at sea you can feel. And particularly as a kid, like not every other kid is going through big adult brain stuff like that.
No, it's not.
So I feel like I have been positioned by God to have gone through all these things. Like I don't feel like the trials and the things in my life are unconnected. I feel like slowly God's just like weaving that further and further into place. So yeah, like I feel like the experiences that I've had help me to understand kids who need to be understood in a way that I probably wouldn't have been able to do in any of those other careers.
Yeah.
The reason I asked you that question because I wanted to rewind back to just to uni a little bit, and you said that your degree even changed during your time there.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about that? But also being a Christian at uni,
Yes.
what was that like for you? So answer whichever you desire first.
Degree changing first. So I first enrolled in a Bachelor of Arts majoring in psychology with an English literature. And then I also did a minor in modern history because I liked it and I needed the units. And so
You needed the units.
So then I got like 2-3 years into my degree and I was like, man, the maths in psych is really hard.
Oh, really?
Oh my goodness, like, yeah.
Why did
long
they need,
exams.
Why did they do maths in psychology?
Psychology has statistics.
Oh, so statistics are hard.
Yeah. So I just remember sitting in a 6-hour exam one day and it had 4 questions.
6-hour exam?
6 hours and it had 4 questions. Yeah. And so I was sitting there and I'm like,
who's ever done a 6-hour exam before?
I was like, what is going on? Why did I choose this? I'm putting myself through hell.
And you just like flip the table, rip it up. I'm never doing this again.
It was an exam where
6 hours for 4
admittedly
questions.
I did have provisions at uni because I was sick.
But still, that's
the
crazy.
exam entirely was 4.5 hours for most people.
Was lunch provided?
But that's still...
But I remember someone... Sorry, this is a sidetrack, but it's a great story.
Yeah, good.
I remember opening this stats exam. It was stats 350 because I still remember it. And I could just hear people around me start crying.
Oh, no.
I was like, I haven't cried yet. Have I got to the right page? And I was just sitting there like...
If I haven't cried yet, I'm going to do well.
I was like, am I not crying because I don't understand how bad this is? Yeah.
Jeez.
It was,
my
So I
goodness.
got to this point in my psych degree and I just was
that's
like,
horrific.
man, I don't think this is for me.
Yeah.
I think it'll still be useful. But I think I am not cut out for a life in this career path. And so then my degree switched from ownership in health and behavioural sciences to the arts faculty. And then I switched up my organisation of my degree. So then I had a double major in psych and English because I'd already had the major in psych.
Yep.
And so then they were like, oh, you need to catch up some history units. You're like behind. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I did all this history stuff. And then I got to the end of my degree and I was about to graduate. And they were like, oh, we've made a mistake. And I was like, what?
Thanks, guys.
And they were like, oh, you've accidentally got more history units for your minor than you do for your English major.
Oh.
So you accidentally have a triple major, but we're not going to put it on your paperwork. So it just ended up being this big mess. But I just moved things around all the time.
Joy.
Which uni?
Wollongong.
Yes.
And then I went to Sydney and it was fantastic.
Trashing Universities.
Yeah.
I like
We're,
Wollongong.
we're known,
It was
Wollongong's
lovely.
very
known for
chill.
doing that.
It was-
I used to sleep a lot on the lawn behind McKinnon.
Yeah.
It's
It's
great.
It's the best. That's a good spot.
It's really nice.
That's a good sport over
Yeah.
there.
There's no crazy duck there. Is it the goose or the duck?
Duck. Yeah.
Duck.
Yeah.
It's insane. It used to attack people and like draw blood.
was
It
an
was
attack duck.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a crazy duck.
Yeah, so that was how I shifted things around at uni. And again, it was just like gotta trust God that this is going to work out and something's going to happen at the end. Being a Christian at uni. I got this kind of good, kind of bad piece of advice when I started, which was judge the teacher and then decide whether you want to be open about your faith. And I was like, whoa.
Oh.
And I was like, okay. I was like, look, I can take criticism and stuff for being a Christian. I don't really care. And my first ever English tute subject that I went to was called English 101 or English 121. And I had this tutor. She terrified me. I used to shake the whole tute. And she was very loud and very aggressive and very, very anti-Christian, to a point where I very quickly realised I feel like if I mention that I'm a Christian or if I'm open about it, it's just going to anger her more and it's not actually going to be effective in this space.
No.
So me being a Christian or being open about being a Christian is not going to achieve anything except perhaps attract more scorn and ridicule to Christianity in a very unhelpful way. So yeah, like we studied a lot of texts that I really felt uncomfortable reading, and so I didn't read them, and then I just sat in my tute. I perfected the nod sagely and write when I hadn't read the book because I was terrified of this woman. But I just thought, you know what, it's 1 or 2 books in the scale of my degree, and if I don't read it, I'm probably faith-wise better off. And if I get in trouble for not reading it, that's okay, and I can just deal with that if that happens.
Yeah.
I found psychology was kind of like this strange experience where I spent so many years studying the magnificent and intricate complexities of the brain and the mind and how that functions in our body, with lecturers who believe that we were created from an explosion in stardust. And I just sat there a lot of the time going, wow, God's so amazing. And then I'm going, how can't they see this? Like, how can't they search for something else? And I found myself like asking some of because none of my friends at uni were Christians. And I found myself asking them questions like, are you satisfied with that explanation?
Oh, that's interesting.
And they're like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I'm like, does it? Does being made from stardust that happened in an explosion explain how the corpus callosum connects between the brain, the 2 hemispheres of the brain? Does that make sense when it comes from stardust? Does it make sense that from stardust, our brains and our bodies are wired acrossways? Like, how does that make sense from stardust? And
how did that go down?
Well, it was interesting. So I was very open with my friends about being Christian, and they were totally cool with it. And they would actually ask me lots of questions. But they were like, really? You believe like some story of this God? They were like, how is stardust different from Adam being created from the dirt? And I was like, yeah.
Fair point.
I'm like, but it wasn't just dirt. It was dirt molded by God. And that's where the difference is. So I feel like I had a lot of opportunities to have some very cool, deep conversations with friends. Awesome. And I think more than anything, like, psychology just helped me even more so, like, see how magnificent we are designed by God.
It almost sounds like God's almost putting you in that situation to become, like, think about your faith more deeply.
Yeah.
Even with those testing kind of questions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I was just looking at Ethan, he's trying not to yawn.
It's okay.
It's okay, you're just a bit tired. Sorry, he just looked at me and then he was like, why is he making that face? He's trying to keep his mouth shut with a yawn. Sorry.
all that subtlety, Ethan.
feel
Joel
like-
just blew it wide open.
Yeah, I was doing really well.
Would you describe me as subtle?
No,
No.
never.
Imagine what my sculpture's like. I can be subtle, just so you guys know. Where was I going to go with that? If God's doing that, do you go to any Christian groups, or you just kind of getting tested enough in your tubes and stuff like that?
I did. And this is nothing against the EU.
European Union.
Yeah,
I see you're a
some
Brexit
strong
supporter.
goals. Yeah, the Evangelical Union at uni, when I was there at the time, and I'm sure it's very different now, it was I found it very cliquey, and I found it really judgy, and I really struggled with it to the point where I gave up going. And I found the difficult thing at the time, and again, I'm sure it's not the same now, was they wanted, if you were in the union, they wanted you to serve at uni. And I was like, dude, I'm in a Bible study, I serve at music, I serve on mission every year. Like, I can't travel 40 Ks to serve at uni as well. Like, at some point I'm going to burn out and I need to still be fed. So, I found that quite difficult. But what I did was I had one of my friends from school was also in my psych course, and she was also a Christian. I now work with her. And we would have these kinds of conversations. So I feel like we were challenging each other and working through stuff that we were learning about in psych, just one-to-one, rather than having like an EU meeting or anything to go to.
So it's
very cool.
just really funny when I keep hearing you say EU.
Sorry, I don't mean the European
Think of Ukraine and the Euros. Anyway, the thing that I was going to say about that, instead of talking about European Union, I've forgotten. Here's another question though: why English? Why English literature? Why do you like that so much?
Oh, I love English. I love it so much. I love studying. It's really, oh man, it makes me so happy.
That's okay. This is why we have all types of personalities on the Chip Lunch podcast.
I just had a natural talent for English at school. So I really liked it. I had the privilege of having the best English teachers when I was at Engadine High.
Nice.
And completely shaped how I viewed English and literature and the value that it had and what it said about people trying to explore their humanity. And then I moved schools and I had amazing English teachers again. And I loved it. And so I just loved studying it, and I loved seeing people's different perspectives on the same thing and the way that their environment had shaped them. So we talk about things like paradigm shifts, which happen historically, but they also affect things like literature and arts and theatre and philosophy and things like that. And I loved seeing how it was almost like the same kind of paradigm shift that people went through in the Bible, but now it was being expressed in different forms. And it was like, like you look at the way that so at the moment I'm preparing to teach an extension course, and I'm looking at utopias and dystopias. And the first utopia that I'm looking at is the Edenic utopia, so the Garden of Eden.
Okay.
And that's how it started. And you just very quickly realize that in 3 chapters, it goes from this utopia to a dystopia. And from that, the rest of time in history are trying to get back to that original Eden.
That's so interesting.
And you just think, like, that's thousands of years and millions of people, all of humanity, like that Bible verse where, like, the earth groans for Jesus to come back and for things to be perfect again. And you just see that in everything. But I just love things like the way that language is used and created and evolves to try and express both creativity but also what we experience as humans. And I love it. I love it so much.
What's your favorite book of all time?
Great Gatsby.
Oh, really?
Wow,
I haven't read
really?
that yet.
Oh my gosh, it is
Really?
so beautiful. So
What's
beautiful.
Who's the author?
F. Scott Fitzgerald.
I read that way too young, I think.
Would you?
Read it again now.
Read it
Okay.
again.
Yeah.
And then do a 10-week study with Lauren on it.
It's
I think I would have loved to.
beautiful.
I had amazing English teachers.
Yeah.
And I got to, I think, year 9.
Yeah.
And my English teacher at the time was just like, you finished the book we're supposed to read in a week. And like, we're studying it and that's great. How about I just like spend the whole term just giving you a new book every week?
Yeah.
And it was
Nice.
just like
I love
classic,
that.
classic,
That's cool.
classic
Yeah.
things I would like. Like she was excellent.
Yeah.
And Great Gatsby was in that. And
Yeah.
My feedback from that was I was like, yeah, it was cool. Not much happened. And I think if I studied it, I would have found it more interesting. But I was kind of like,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
It's just so beautifully descriptive.
mm.
So there's this.
It's well written, but I was
yeah,
just kind of
so
like,
there's I teach it,
Mm.
and F. Scott Fitzgerald said that every single word in that book was intentionally placed where it is.
really, that's super cool.
So it's so crafted and honed,
Mm.
and it's
Sculpted.
just sculpted again. It's just I love it. It's beautiful.
That's very
Yeah.
cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't read much fiction these days, so I'm trying to read a little bit more fiction. I'm mainly on a non-fiction reader.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm trying to find some.
Mm.
I'm quite picky with my fiction. Like if it's dumb, I'm just like, sorry.
Yeah.
Not if it's dumb. If I can't get into it,
Yes.
I'm like, But
Yeah.
one of my favourite writers is John le Carré, who
Oh
is
yeah. The crime writer.
yeah, or it's spy. It's more spy
Yeah.
books, and he has a book called The Honourable Schoolboy. It's very similar to what you're saying. Not similar to Great Gatsby, but in terms of the it's 3/4 of it is set in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And it's so evocatively described. Like he's a very slow.
Yeah.
Like when you read it, it feels slow, but he can actually the way he writes
Yeah.
is it actually ends up being fast paced anyway,
Yes. Yep.
which is really quite interesting. But also the way he describes Hong Kong is really cool. Like you
Yeah.
feel like you're there when you're reading it.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate English or English when you can get writing that good
Yeah.
and you are taken away to another place
Yep.
and you can understand it. And maybe that's just the storytelling too. Like I'm reading Harry Potter with my kids at the
Yeah.
moment, and that's exciting. And so it's the same thing. But I think the storytelling aspect of
Yes.
English is what really fascinates me,
Yeah.
and the ability for people to be phenomenally good at that and
Yeah.
also phenomenally bad
Yeah,
is
yeah.
really interesting.
And you think, like, if you look at the Bible, like when Joel and I did the Old Testament course, like learning about how there's different text types in the Bible for different purposes. Like, the Bible is essentially this one big narrative telling the history of humanity and God's love for us. And you look at the way that it's constructed, and it's beautiful.
It is.
It's
so
beautiful, and it's so intentional. And yeah, I just love that.
And it's fascinating when you get into more detail how intentional it is. Because
Yes.
originally, like your friends at uni are like, "Oh, really? You believe this old
Yeah.
story?" But it's
Yeah.
like there's so much more intentionality
Yes.
that God has put behind it
Yep.
that you only realize it the more you study it.
Yeah.
And isn't that the beautiful thing about, like, you're talking about Great Gatsby? You study it every year or whenever you're teaching it, but the Bible is like. You can read a passage and get one thing out of it,
Yeah.
and read it 3 years later and get something
Some-
different
yeah.
out of it. Like
Completely.
that's what's amazing
And
about it.
it's unlike any other book in that it is applicable and can be understood by anyone, any age,
Yeah.
Anytime.
any time.
Yeah.
Like no other book functions like that.
No.
Yeah.
You can't give like Hamlet to a 3-year-old.
No. You could not. Not
You
at
probably sometimes can't even give it to a 30-year-old. But you can give the Bible to a 3-year-old and a 30-year-old, and they'll still understand it, and a 90-year-old, and
Yeah. And it's when we talk about at Soli's, we talk about doing church in a way that is all age, all stage.
Yeah.
And one of the big reasons we do that is because the gospel is for anyone of any age at any stage in life.
Yeah.
And that doesn't just mean age. That's
Yes.
why we say them both, because
Absolutely.
it doesn't matter where you're at, but the
Yeah.
gospel is for you. And
Yeah.
the Bible is written in a way and constructed in such a way that you could be spending years doing PhD after PhD, or you can be reading it in your downtime, like and getting
absolutely.
so much
Yeah.
out of it, and it really speaks to you. It's really beautiful. What Joel has in front of him right now is an encyclopedia on the Bible, an illustrated encyclopedia on the Bible, and I probably won't ever read it.
Righto.
Because
It's that bad.
No, because I would much rather be told something or hear it in the sermon or find it in commentaries. I'm finding specific things or whatever.
Yeah.
Like however, you guys earlier were talking about how you used to just sit and read encyclopedias.
Yes.
That's a thing that your brains are wired to think like that. It's a really incredible book. Another point is that the John Piper series on Romans is fantastic.
Yeah.
And what made me think of that was you were talking about how the Bible is so intentional, and Fitzgerald, the guy who wrote Great Gatsby, Fitzgerald, talks about how all the different words is individually. It's so interesting as John Piper goes through Romans for a year and a bit or years, years in Romans.
Yeah.
He does it almost word by word. Like he is going verse by verse by verse. And sometimes he'll spend weeks on a verse because he can just unpack. You can just get so much out of it.
Yeah.
And it is so intentionally placed. And that's just one book. Romans is incredible.
Yeah.
But it is just one book in this
and then I guess
huge expanse.
If he went back and read it 2 months later, he'd think of
fully
a completely different perspective.
Yeah, he could write a whole new sermon.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
And again, I think that speaks to the complexity and is it omniscient? I always get that wrong.
Omniscient?
Omniscience.
Yeah.
And omnipotence of God. And complexity probably sums that up better. But of what we were all talking about is all just this. And back to what your friends are saying in uni. It's like, oh, okay, just like an explosion happened and there's all this complexity just came out of thin air. And I think that's why I always think now of when certain people talk about the Big Bang or whatever, is that like, but there's so much more complexity. Like, surely this was designed for a reason.
Yeah. And there is a huge kind of movement in science at the moment. I was reading this article the other day that the more they look into it, like with apologetics and stuff as well, like the more they look into different areas of science, the less atheism and agnosticism can answer.
Really?
And they're finding more and more that they're like, okay, well, that actually has to have come from some intention somewhere.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. It's amazing.
So we got
So
to the point
cool.
where you finished uni,
Oh, yeah.
even after they
I
made...
told you I can talk a lot.
No, that's all right.
No, it's good. It's good.
Even though they made like heaps of mistakes with
Yeah,
your
man.
credits and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you became a teacher?
Yep.
Teaching straight out of uni?
Yep.
Where did you teach at?
So I went straight to MTeach and I did 2 years of MTeach.
What's MTeach?
So Masters of Teaching in secondary with English and History.
Oh, yeah, as your main core subjects, yep.
And so then there was more mess. So the prac office at Sydney Uni is really not organised. Like...
You found some disorganised organisations.
Where they're like, don't organise your own prac, and then it's like 2 days before prac, and you're like, I don't have a prac yet. So very graciously, my Bible study leader at the time was a teacher at the Christian school, and she was like, hey, you can come do a prac with me. Like, I'll just shuffle some things around, and that was amazing. And I kind of went, yep, this is what I like doing,
awesome.
And I like talking to kids, and I like that I can be passionate about something and share that. Because, like, what's the point in being passionate about something if you can't share it with people? And then I did, like, quite a hard placement at a school in Western Sydney, which I loved. Like, I learnt so much, and just, like... it wasn't that far from where I live, and the kids' lives were just so different.
Yeah.
Like the school had a breakfast club because the kids would come and they hadn't eaten food. There was kids who were getting picked up by the cops because something had happened at home. Like these poor kids, but they just kept turning up. And yeah, and I just think like that's something particularly about teaching, where you've got like these teenagers who are again being sculpted by life in this really formative but like a roller coaster time in their life. And there's adults who aren't related to them who are placed there, who they can talk to, and who like they can go, well, I like the way that person responds to conflict, and they kind of can just watch you. And then I finished my master's, and I did a long, like a term placement at the Christian school, and then I landed a mat leave position. Yeah, and I think like 2 days before the end of school, the lady who was in charge of the faculty that I now lead resigned. And I was doing my MEd at the same time, so Masters of Education in Special and Inclusive Education. And I got called down to the principal's office, and I was like, oh no, they're sagging me. What have I done? And then I was like, I just walked in, I was like, I just want to say, I'm so sorry. And they were like,
what did you do?
They were like, what did you do? And I was like, isn't that why I'm here? And they're like, I was like, I don't know what I did, but it must have been bad. And they were like, just chill. We just want to ask you to do something for us. And so then I did that position. I held the acting role for a year, and then my contract was ending, and I said to the principal, I was like, did you know my contract ends today? And you haven't? He's like, oh, yeah, like the position's yours. And I was like, because I don't have a job otherwise.
Big weight off the shoulders.
Yeah,
That's
and so
very cool.
I've been there, this is my 9th year.
Sick.
But it was, again, roller coaster. Like
Yeah.
I went to uni for 8.5 years straight. I studied while I was teaching. I became a head teacher in my first year out of teaching, into probably what in any school is the most delicate unit. Because you're dealing with people whose children have disabilities, and like the health system is not user friendly. Like
No.
you need to help guide people, and yeah, and I love it. I absolutely love my job, and I love where I work and the people I work with and the kids, and yeah.
That's always nice to hear.
Yeah.
Tell us, last question before the last question.
Yeah.
How did you end up coming to Sorrel?
Oh, so there was a bunch of us leaving the church that we were in, and I was like, okay, well, I got to think about a new church. And I had my like non-negotiables, which were things like it had to be biblical sound teaching. There had to be like there needed to be a focus on people and community, and and a couple of other things which I now can't remember.
Need to be on the podcast.
That's top, I think.
Top.
People are the good-looking ones. That's top.
So
All about aesthetics.
Top of the list.
all
top of the
aesthetics,
list.
Yeah.
Podcast, aesthetics. That's it.
Yeah.
YouTube channel.
YouTube channel. Always plug.
So I went to like a couple of churches, and I was like, oh yeah, that's all right. And my friend Lindsay, who used to come here, who now lives in Scotland.
Oh, Lindsay
Yeah.
Minto.
Lindsay Minto
Right.
was like, hey, you should come visit my church. And this was when we were at PAC, and I walked in and I was like, so I write in my Bible in sermons. I don't do it so much now because I'm usually on my phone, but I've always had Bibles with like the margins.
The
Yeah,
notes.
little-
and the-
little
Right
line
all in
sections.
it. So
Yep.
my mission sermons that I'd hear on mission were always covered in notes. And I found that I didn't always have that when I was at the church I was at. And I remember I went to the PAC service, and I looked down at the end of the sermon. I just went, yeah, wow, that's the teaching I need.
Yeah, cool.
And then I still remember we had hamburgers for dinner, and I sat with Jared,
Yeah.
And we were just talking about, like, he was telling me about what this church is like and why they do meals and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, this is the place. Like, this is the place that does church the way that people need. Like, it's authentic. And I think it's also very, very closely and probably intentionally linked to, like, the early Christian churches. So they would meet around meals and they would do life together. It wasn't just turn up on a Sunday, do your things and then leave.
Church for an hour.
Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, these are my people. And so I stayed.
Well,
Rest is history.
the rest is
Yeah.
history.
Yeah.
Last question then.
Yes.
So we've looked over a lot of your life.
Yeah.
What do you wish you knew as an older Christian, you wish you knew as a younger Christian?
I probably wish I had learnt my lessons without the really big things.
Fair.
I think I probably still am learning this lesson, but I wish I had learnt a little bit more of it when I was younger, which is that if I'm praying for it, it's not necessarily that God's going to do that, but he'll do something. And then later on, I'll learn why. Yeah.
Which I think is what you've been talking about.
Which I feel like I'm constantly learning that lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's good advice.
Yeah.
It's very good advice.
It's just like, I remember someone saying, like, God's going to show up. He's always shown up.
Always shows up.
And so I was like, okay. So I think sometimes I'm like, are you going to show up soon?
Where are you?
Yeah. But it's just, knowing that it's not my timeline, it's his timeline.
Yeah, fully.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're tempted to come up with our own timeline and say, well, this is when it will happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's also important to think of, like, just praying won't resolve the problem for you. I think sometimes that there is some advice around Christians saying, just pray. And it'll be great. And it's like, well, that's not entirely helpful.
And also, prayer doesn't look like, dear God, this is the thing that I want.
Amen.
Amen. Like, it's not that. Like, if you look at some of the people in the Bible, like if you look at the Psalms, they're just like crying out to God, like, here's all my emotions. And it's just, I think that's something that I've probably learned over time. It's not like praying because I want something. It's sometimes, you got to remember, like, being Christian is a relationship. And you got to talk to God the same way that you would talk to like your family or your friends, and like, you got to communicate. And although we know that God knows everything, sometimes it's admitting it to ourselves as well. And so you kind of do that, and you talk to God, and then you're like, oh, that was for me, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's probably a good time to wrap up the chips.
Yeah.
To finalise the episode. I just want to say that thank you for coming on, Lauren. I think it's been very encouraging.
Super.
I think it's been, this is why we do this podcast.
100%.
I think is because lots of people come on and say, oh, I don't have much to say. And then we talk for an hour plus, and it's almost like we're being sharpened as we do the podcast, I think, because we hear from everyone else's learnings as Christians. And that's why, like I said, that's why we do the podcast, is because that's what we hope that other people will get from it as well. So thanks for your vulnerability, and thank you for being willing to talk about many things. And
for the hilarity and the fun and
that's right.
all of it.
Yeah.
Like, it was all excellent.
Yeah. So any final words, Ethan, before?
Just that it was all really lovely.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thanks.
No worries. We finish every episode with a one way, so if you would like to do that with us, we can. Thank you again for everyone listening or watching. We'll finish with a one way.